Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar on accelerating recurring revenue growth with backup for Office 365. I'm Sam Meegahage, CEO of Probax, and today I'm joined by Alan Warmington, Cloud Manager at Veeam. Before we get started, I just need to run through a few housekeeping items. So firstly, everyone has been muted. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. It's unlikely that we'll need the full hour today, so we should have plenty of time to get to your questions. Today's presentation is of course being recorded and we'll aim to get these slides and the recording over to you as soon as practical. So our agenda for today looks a little bit like this. To start things off, we'll be looking at the adoption rate of Office 365 and what that means for your MSP business. Next, Alan will explain why all organisations who are using Office 365 today really need an Office 365 data protection strategy. I'll then share our views on how you can really ramp up your recurring revenue growth by selling a backup for Office 365 solution. After that, we'll talk a little bit about our very own solution, which includes a demo. And lastly, we'll open it up to you guys for any questions that you have before closing out the webinar. All right, so let's get started. So in February this year, Microsoft CEO made a comment that suggested that Microsoft could grow more from Office 365 than anything else in the company's 43-year history. Now that's pretty remarkable. But what does that mean for you guys? What does that mean for the MSP? Well, let's take a closer look at the adoption rate. So according to a recent report by Big Glass, over half of organizations worldwide have already deployed Office 365. Now that's a pretty astonishing number. That's over 125 million active subscribers worldwide. Now it's no surprise that the cloud has introduced multiple innovations like Office 365 that have disrupted business models across the modern economy. So MSPs have had to change their business models significantly to adapt from providing on-premise services to accommodating new cloud offerings. But what that's done is it's essentially created a new market for MSPs by giving you guys the opportunity to sell more to your existing customers as well as attracting new ones. So there's a significant amount of money to be made with Office 365, and if you haven't already started to take advantage of this, in my opinion, you're leaving money on the table. What are your thoughts on that, Alan? I presume you agree?
It's interesting. We've looked at sort of even just from the data protection side for Office 365, and if you look at our traditional backup business, traditionally the MSP space has been backing up virtual machines. Compare the number of virtual machines that a typical SMB or mid-market customer might have compared to the number of employees that might have using Office 365. Actually, the way we view the data protection for O365 market is pretty similar to what Microsoft is saying. It's actually quite likely that we could see O365 backup start to outstrip some of our traditional revenues from other areas, and we're just looking at this as a just licensing component. So obviously the service is much bigger than that, but just on raw Veeam licensing, it's a really significant opportunity for us as well. So we're very excited about it, and that growth rate that you're showing, the growth of adoption is phenomenal. So I just want to share a little bit more around, I suppose, the way we're looking at O365, the importance and significance of sort of SaaS-based services. You talked a lot, Sam, around, I suppose, the growth of Office 365, the market opportunity for O365 and services around O365 inside sort of the MSP's traditional customer base. I want to dig a little bit deeper into O365 itself, why do customers like it, why we're seeing the growth rates that we're seeing. But also, for us, it kind of comes down to trust in these SaaS-based offerings. We look at Azure and we know that O365 itself is a separate service to other Azure services, but we do know that they share the same sorts of infrastructure. So for us, and what customers share with us, is the reason why they adopt O365 is really the scale and significance that Microsoft represents in market. They are now the largest geographically and as far as spread of their services. Azure is now one of the largest cloud services available to customers. They have 54 Azure regions with more coming to market. This slide is now probably a couple of months old, so I'd imagine some of those green dots that say coming soon are already in production. So you start to get that feel for customers that are looking to start hosting these kind of workloads in Azure and adopt O365 services that are hosted in Azure regions. You say, you know what, I've now got region close to me. I've got really, really good connectivity. I know there's things like geo-redundancy. I'm starting to put a really high level of trust and faith in the Microsoft services. And then from there, being able to look at, you know, the connectivity that Microsoft has started to gain. This is now one of the largest independent networks in the world, 2.5 million kilometres of fibre available. Something like 700% increase in their WAN capacity in the last 3 years. So for businesses looking to adopt new cloud services, connectivity, availability are probably sort of the two of the main concerns they look at when they start looking at public cloud offerings. So that level of comfort that we want from our O365 services is starting to become available to us, and we trust that these services will be available when we need it, as we need it, and really have that faith in the uptime of the services. There's sort of some more practical reasons too, and you know, you guys on the call will know this as your customers are adopting these services as well. But there's a practical reason for choosing SaaS-based services, and the first one is really having that sort of single, scalable admin experience. Right? We no longer need to worry about things like my infrastructure that my Exchange server is sitting on. If I want to activate new features that Microsoft have brought out, I don't have to do a lift and shift. I don't have to upgrade my services. Quite literally, it's an evergreen service, right? So as Microsoft enable new productivity features or new collaboration tools, I can start adopting those for my staff and my users without having to make any significant upgrades or investment in my infrastructure. So from that side, it's very interesting. There's also a number of different plans, of course, whether I'm a small business or a medium business, different plans available to me all the way through to enterprise scale services. For our traditional market, we see people really choosing one of the business premium type services, which is sort of limited to, you know, 300 seats or so. I don't want to dig too deeply into the different plans, but the thing I like to call out on this particular slide, and I do sort of admit that this slide probably changes pretty regularly, but down the bottom here, if I'm looking for any kind of email archiving, e-discovery, mailbox hold type feature set, I really need to be in that enterprise, really up to E3 or E5 type plan. And once I start getting into that kind of range, you know, your typical small business, you know, it's kind of beyond the scope for what they're looking for. They're looking for the collaboration tools, looking for Office, but they're not really looking to spend, you know, $30 or $50 a month to start getting some of these more advanced features that they could otherwise be looking for. So it kind of leads us to the next bit is, you know, why do I need backup? Traditional users of SaaS services, you know, the feeling in market is, you know, do I need to back something up if it's hosted in a SaaS platform? You know, I have a level of comfort, surely, that Microsoft is taking care of it. And that, for our customers, the customers we've surveyed, typically is the biggest misunderstanding we see in market. There's a kind of perception that if I've got my data hosted in an Office 365 service, that Microsoft is managing all of that data for me. But there's a reality here, and that is that Microsoft's focus is on the uptime of the Office 365 infrastructure and services. They make sure that there is the services available to you, but in fact the data inside O365 platforms is actually the customer's responsibility. And that's something that most customers don't typically consider. So it's really up to us, Veeam, Probax, and the guys in this call to start educating our customers a little bit on what is it that you actually take responsibility for, and is there more that we can be doing for our customers to ensure that we're removing some of these availability gaps or risks in their business. So in fact, Microsoft tell us this, right? They actually say on their Trust Center, you know, with O365, it's your data, you own it, you control it. And for that, that's probably a really powerful message to be able to take back to our customer bases to say, you know what, as much as we love the service, we love O365, we love what it delivers to our businesses and our staff, but, you know, you've got to start taking some control and responsibility for the data that resides in the service. So here's a survey we did, it was probably about 12 months ago now. I don't have the exact number of customers that were surveyed, but these are existing Veeam customers that we went back and surveyed around O365. And the main question is, are you backing it up? What are you doing with that data? And the interesting thing in this space is that 76% of respondents actually said we don't have a backup strategy or data protection strategy for O365 today. The common response is, no, we're sort of relying on Microsoft's geo redundancy. We know that they do geo replication. Surely things are fine. The good news or the silver lining for us is that, half of those respondents said, you know what, we don't today, but we know that we need to have a backup solution. So they've already identified that there's a gap in their business on, availability of data gap. There was a number of customers already that are backing up to on-premises, and then, of course, some that have already adopted some kind of cloud service, so they're backing up to elsewhere. So definitely fairly significant to say that 76% of the market, and if you look at the size of the market that Sam was referring to before, don't have a backup strategy today. They're looking at it, but potentially haven't made a decision or are unaware of what they should do moving forward. So we've worked with Microsoft pretty closely on building this slide out. This is the O365 shared responsibility model, and it sort of takes a customer through what's Microsoft doing and what should you be doing as a customer with respect to your data. And the first part is really covering what is the primary responsibility. So at the outset, Microsoft obviously take responsibility for the global infrastructure. They have SLAs, and they're very very solid on the uptime of the service, ensuring that the cloud services that the customer is subscribing to are available to the customer and staff. But of course, the data, as I mentioned before, the access and control of your data in Office 365 is actually the customer's responsibility. And you'll get a copy of this slide later too if you need to reference it. There's a bunch of supporting technologies we use to help protect our data. So obviously Office 365 has some data replication. They do DC to DC geo redundancy. This is really good in ensuring that the service maintains availability. But of course, if you have deleted things or if there's a corruption in the data, all you tend to be doing is, of course, replicating corrupt data. So from a customer responsibility, it really is up to them to ensure that they have a copy of their data stored in a different location, off-site, on-prem, somewhere else, that they know they can access that data for more of a longer-term data retention strategy. And from there, Microsoft do provide a recycle bin. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but you'll typically get up to 30 days, potentially more if you change the settings, which will give you some limited short-term data loss recovery. There's no ability to do point-in-time recovery, of course, but you can find items if they've been accidentally deleted within a short period of time. But of course, if you wanted a full data retention strategy, you need a short-term and long-term data retention strategy. And of course, there's a whole lot of policy gaps that are typical responsibilities and requirements that businesses have for various reasons. Maybe it's compliance or something else. And having the ability to find that data, be able to pull data out of a point-in-time recovery, all very important to adhering to those compliance strategies. At a security layer, Microsoft obviously have security for the physical locations. There's logical security. They have very tight user admin controls. But at a data level, there's a certain number of threats that we typically customers may or may not have thought about. Things like internal threats. So there's accidental deletion. There may be, and no one really likes to talk about it, but malicious insiders doing things, or maybe a disgruntled employee. Even things like event tampering, if there's an email chain that might be relevant to a HR or to a legal or to a risk or a compliance officer, there's opportunities for people to access that data if you don't have a proper backup strategy. Then of course there's external things like ransomware, malware, hackers, those kinds of things that are really the responsibility of the organisation or the customer to ensure they have a strategy to protect against it. And then from a regulatory and compliance perspective, there's things like GDPR to consider. So we now have defined responsibilities that Microsoft might be the data processor as far as having being the processor of O365 data, but ultimately the customer has the role as the data owner. So they are still answerable to maybe it's their internal legal teams or compliance officers, HR, people like that, and need to be able to respond to requests for information internally. So very important things, and sort of that there's a shared responsibility between what is Microsoft able to do and what is the customer able to do. So kind of leads us to the 6 main reasons why we see there's real need for a data protection strategy for Office 365. The first one's the most obvious one. It's something like 61% of all restoration requests that we've seen have actually come from accidental deletion. So there's a real critical need here, even if it's just from a productivity angle. Someone's got something and deleted something from SharePoint or OneDrive, or potentially it's email items, being able to recover from those quickly, not having to put through a service request or dig down into deleted items to try and find things. Having a nice strategy for being able to address that is really important. There is the internal security threats, which I mentioned. There's a whole bunch of this as well. So I talked about malicious insiders, or maybe there's departing employees that might have another agenda. But there's some other things too. So we talk about things like privilege creep, where people, maybe an administrator had access to a tool or a function in a certain role, and they've moved roles over time, and they've still maintained access to systems and tools that they perhaps shouldn't have. So there's some other things that are important to consider around security, but again, protecting yourself from that might be a case of being able to restore items that have been deliberately deleted or whatever. External security threats, I mentioned ransomware and maybe rogue applications, but there are some videos online now. In fact, I was watching one just not that long ago around someone who'd actually crypto-locked their O365 account. Now, this person had actually done it on purpose to prove a point for a video, but these threats are becoming more and more real. Being able to restore and recover an entire organisation's exchange back in place removes a lot of that opportunity for ransomware attackers. Being able to recover an entire SharePoint site or individual items and having granular item level restore removes the risk of some of these particular threats. Legal and compliance requirements I kind of mentioned before, but there's a whole bunch of stuff for your customers around obviously things like HIPAA compliance. So if you've got health agencies that you're talking to or customers today, it's kind of a statement there that those entities must securely back up retrievable exact copies of electronic protected health information and must be able to fully restore any loss of data. So there's some really important compliance requirements that health organisations need to adhere to, as well as in financial services, places like that. It's typically 6 or 7 years worth of data needs to be able to be recoverable and identifiable, and you need to be able to get right down into granular level restore for those things as well. A short point on managing hybrid deployments. The Veeam software will actually allow you to protect both O365 instances, so that is the stuff sitting in O365, as well as on-prem Exchange, so SharePoint Online, SharePoint on-prem, as well as Exchange on-prem. But it also becomes a good tool for being able to migrate customers from on-premises to O365 as well. So the O365 Veeam solution is able to help you with that as well. And the last thing is just having these retention policy of confusion, gaps in availability. Most people don't actually understand what Microsoft is protecting for you, for how long, what's a problem if it's deleted. So it's actually just being able to remove any of that confusion, and that's actually an important part of the policy, is understanding how do we close off those availability gaps. So here's a slide that we put together with Microsoft on the retention policies. These do change from time to time, but this was current as of probably about 60 days ago. So the stuff that's sitting in your inbox or the folder data tends to be okay. It does get archived off at a term, after a term. But deleted items is a problem. It typically sits there for a month before it disappears. And then you've got the other stuff there around SharePoint and OneDrive that things will be permanently deleted. The big one that I've seen actually is employees that leave the company. So once an organisation has staff that have been removed from the system, they'll typically send a request to Microsoft saying deactivate these accounts. You have 30 days to find a way to do something with that data before that data is permanently deleted. And that's really a problem in larger organisations where they have staff rotating through the business, and maybe there's lots of employees coming and going across the course of a year. The biggest interesting thing that I see, and we talk about availability gaps at Veeam, is actually that most people don't identify a compromise or a loss of data until 140 days after that data has been compromised. So there's a huge issue in identifying that something either has been breached or removed, and things like internal threats. They're usually the hardest thing to identify. So the biggest issue here, of course, is that sits at that 140 days is well past that typical 30 to 90 days that is the typical retention setting for some of these areas. So definitely an availability gap that we look to address. Of course, the ideal scenario from here is getting to a state like this. Now, this is a fun slide. Everything's green, it's Veeam, it's easy. But at this point in time, running a backup for Office 365 solution gives you that level of, first of all, understanding what is being protected, having control over the things that are protected, and having the flexibility to choose what is and what isn't protected, the retention policy for each item, and then having that really granular level of ability to try and find lost items, being able to do things like folder compare and those kinds of things as well. So this is obviously the ideal state for customers to say, you know what, I know what my availability gaps are. I know what they were, but I now have a methodology of removing those concerns from the business. Sam, I think I hand back over to you at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Alan. That was really, really informative. All right, so let's talk about how we grow your business with Office 365 Backup. So earlier on in the presentation, I spoke about how MSPs have had to change their business model to adapt from providing on-premise services to accommodating new cloud offerings. Now, these changes have been quite significant, right? So customer service offerings have needed to change, impacting traditional business lines, affecting profit margins, and essentially forcing MSPs to reskill their staff. That all obviously comes at a cost. However, MSPs who have made the transition to providing cloud services have really reaped the benefits. So research conducted by Microsoft and IDC found that partners with 50% or more revenue generated from cloud-related sales made 1.5 times the gross profit compared to their less cloudy peers. Now, this shouldn't really be overly surprising to anyone on this webinar. You know, everyone is aware that margins on traditional business lines like hardware and software have been shrinking over the years. Meanwhile, margins on most cloud services have been incredibly rewarding for MSPs. So if you take our very own cloud data protection services as an example, most of our partners today sit in somewhere around our silver tier where margins start at 40%. And I say start because the way our business model works, the more you sell, the more margin you make across your entire client base. So Alan spoke about the need for an Office 365 data protection strategy for your clients, but what's in it for you guys? You know, what's in it for the MSPs? Why should you be focusing your energy on selling it? So as I've mentioned previously, you know, Office 365 presents a tremendous opportunity for MSPs. With over half of organizations worldwide having deployed Office 365 already, that essentially means that everyone listening to this webinar should have a bunch of customers that they can sell to straight away. Next is peace of mind, both for you and your clients. So wouldn't it be great knowing that if something was to happen to your client's Office 365 data, whether that's an accidental deletion, an internal or external security threat, you can recover it within minutes. You know, you don't need to spend hours trying to restore data when you can simply log into our dashboard, find the items you need, and then hit restore. Next up is capturing new clients. Now, in my opinion, Backup for Office 365 should be one of your new leading products that will allow you to get your foot in the door with new clients. And why do I say that? Well, there's 4 reasons. The first, again, I'm going to talk about the adoption rate, but if you're talking with a prospect, there's a good chance they're already using Office 365. Number 2 is that everyone needs it. They may not know that they need it, but as Alan explained before, everyone needs an Office 365 data protection strategy. Number 3 is it's a really simple product to comprehend and therefore sell. So seeing is believing, and it's a product that's incredibly simple to demo, as you'll see in a few minutes. And number 4 is it has very rewarding margins. Now, I'll talk more about revenue and margin generation in the next slide. But moving along onto the next point, strengthening client relationships. So by educating your clients on the need for Office 365 backup, you demonstrate how you're adding value as an MSP. As more and more organizations are moving to the cloud, MSPs really need to stay relevant by demonstrating how they can add value to their clients' cloud strategy. Otherwise, you just risk being left behind. You know, your clients will move to the cloud without you. And if you don't educate your clients, I guarantee you that one of your competitors will. Lastly is increased profitability. So by selling backup for Office 365, you're essentially adding a new recurring revenue stream to your business with very little effort. So let's talk about the dollars. So, you know, at first glance, the product may seem cheap and you may think to yourself, how do I even make money selling this? So let's look at a basic example. So assume you've got one customer with 100 seats. Now that's essentially 100 Office 365 users. And for each of those users, you're going to charge $4.50 per month for mailbox protection. Now that equates to $5,400 in revenue for 1 year. And again, we're just talking about one client here. Now I'm just talking about Exchange and mailbox protection. So most of our partners today are selling on or more than $4.50 per mailbox. So these figures are real. Now, based on the average margin that our partners are receiving for backup for Office 365, that equates to $2,160 in margin each year for one client. So my next question to you is, how many clients do you have? Now, assume that half of your clients don't want it or they're not using Office 365. That's still a considerable amount that gets added to both your top line and your bottom line each year. So now that we understand why it's needed and how it can help grow your business, how do we go about selling it? Well, like anything you sell, the first thing is to identify your target clients. So my suggestion would be to focus on the low-hanging fruit. And what I mean by that is target your clients who already understand the importance of their data and the need to protect it. Whether that be for compliance in their specific industry or something else, those are the clients who are naturally going to be more receptive to the discussion. Once you've identified your clients, the next point is to sit down, have a conversation and educate your clients. So take everything that we've discussed in this presentation, as I mentioned before, as Alan mentioned it, this will be made available to you afterwards. The slides will be made available, the recording will be made available. So go back if you have to and really absorb this information. But essentially use this to explain to your clients why they need to invest in an Office 365 data protection strategy. Now, my guess is that most of them don't really understand why they need it. So it's really your responsibility to provide them with the facts so that they can make an informed decision. Demo the solution. So again, seeing is believing. So a quick 2-minute demo of the solution should show your clients how simple and effective it can be to protect their data. Now the demo I'm about to show you will be made available on our knowledge base site as well as a YouTube channel, so feel free to use that when you're having the conversation with your clients. And lastly, start small if you have to. So not everyone's going to want to pull the trigger straight away, whether that be for budgetary reasons or something else. My suggestion to you is to use the flexibility of the solution to your advantage by recommending that they protect their key staff to begin with and scale from there. So let's talk about Probax's Backup for Office 365 solution. So it should be no surprise that Probax Backup for Office 365 is powered by Veeam. And what I mean by that is we've taken Veeam's Backup for Office 365 product, we've utilized their API to build a simple yet intuitive user interface, and we've made it a pure cloud-to-cloud solution. So there's nothing at all that you need to do to install or manage. Now we're taking up to 6 daily point-in-time restore points and pushing them into AWS. Our current offering supports Exchange only. However, support for SharePoint and OneDrive is just around the corner. In terms of data restoration, your options are you can either restore back to the original source or you can export to file. So when it comes to Exchange, we're exporting to PST. When it's SharePoint and OneDrive, we're exporting to zip. You'll notice in the middle there below the Amazon cloud, you've got unlimited storage and retention. So for a fixed monthly fee per user, you receive unlimited storage and retention in AWS. So as an MSP, you don't need to worry about your costs blowing out as your client's data grows. You don't need to pay for a Veeam license. That's kind of built into the overall monthly fee. You don't need to worry about data transfer or restoration fees. You simply pay a fixed monthly cost per user and everything else is included. So what you're about to see now is a pre-recorded demo because they don't trust me with live demos, but it's essentially Probax Control. So that's our centralized dashboard for monitoring and managing your client's data protection solutions. You use the same dashboard to manage all your client's data protection requirements across your entire client base, whether that's backup as a service, archive as a service, DR as a service, Veeam licensing, or even backup for Office 365. It's just the one portal. Now in the backup for Office 365 interface, you'll notice that there's some SharePoint and OneDrive options which have been grayed out. Now they'll remain grayed out until we've formally launched version 2 of the product in the not so distant future. So let's get into it. All right, so this is what it looks like. This is essentially, like I said, Probax Control. You'll see the interface for backup for Exchange very soon. But the first thing we want to do, now that we've created a client, we want to go ahead and add an Office 365 organization. So we simply click on Add. From there, you want to select where you want to store the data. So your options are AWS in Sydney or AWS in North Virginia, which is on the East Coast. Now, we're more than open to turning on more AWS locations if the demand's there. So once you enter in your Office 365 administrator credentials, the organization's been added, and now I can select which mailboxes I want protected. I can also choose whether I want to automatically protect new mailboxes as they're created. Now, before I demonstrate a test restore, I'm going to perform an on-demand backup, which can be done in addition to the 6 daily backups, which are done automatically. So I'll go ahead and click that. I'll click backup now, followed by close. Next, I'm going to open up Outlook. And I'm going to delete some items from my accounts mailbox. So I've deleted an individual email, and I'm just about to delete an entire folder as well. So there we go. So now that they're gone, I'm going to go back into Probax Control and initiate a restore. So simply click on Restore. I then select the restore point I want to restore from. I navigate to the mailbox, I find the items I want, and I click on Restore. So here I'm restoring an individual email as well as an entire folder. Once that's done, I'm going to hit Close, and then I'm going to head back into Outlook. So you'll notice that Outlook now has a new restore folder, and within that folder is another folder showing the date of the restore point you used, and in there will be the items that you asked to be restored. So from here, it's as simple as just drag and drop. So that can be performed by you, your staff, or even the end user. It's a fairly simple process. And that's essentially it. So within 2 minutes, I demoed a quick restore in Office 365. So what's so great about our backup for Office 365 solution? Well, as you saw, it's incredibly simple to configure. If you get stuck or if you run into problems, we have a comprehensive knowledge-based site that you can always refer to. But in my experience, you won't need it. It's fairly intuitive and really simple to use. Number 2 is extended protection. So our solution performs 6 point-in-time backups per day, and you can perform additional on-demand backups as needed. Number 3 is quick recovery of items. So again, as per the demo, restoration of items is quick and easy. Once version 2 is launched, the restoration of OneDrive and SharePoint will be just as easy. Number 4 is compliance and security. So security was at the forefront of our minds when we built this solution. We were adamant about incorporating a built-in and downloadable audit trail of all administrator actions. And one of the reasons why we chose to integrate with AWS was for their high level of encryption, but we also wanted to protect your clients from a risk management point of view by keeping data outside of the Microsoft environment. And lastly, scalability and peace of mind. So, for a fixed fee per user, that provides unlimited storage and retention AWS. Now, as one of our partners has described it to me, it's a set and forget solution. You don't need to worry about managing your client's data growth or usage. You simply set it up and rest easy knowing that your client's Office 365 data is protected and you're receiving a steady stream of recurring revenue. So we first launched our Backup for Office 365 solution in July, and here are just some of the things that our partners are saying about the solution. Just before we wrap it up, I just wanted to show our viewers all the other data protection services that we offer today. As you can see, nearly all of them integrate with or are powered by Veeam. So everything that's in green means that we either integrate with or it's built on Veeam technology. So if you'd like to see some more information on any of these services, just hit up our friendly sales team and they'll be happy to assist you with whatever you need. The last slide before we open it up for questions is if you're an MSP who has not used Probax before, now is the perfect time to sign up. The first thing to do is to create a no obligation free trial by going to probax.io/join. So no payment details are required. Once your account has been created, which will be immediately because the entire process is automated, you'll have access to backup as a service, you'll have access to backup for Office 365, and you'll also have access for Dropbox backup and archive. And you'll have access to that for 14 days. Now, if your evaluation goes well, which I'm sure it will, we're running a promotion which literally just started a week or two ago. And it's running until the end of November, where you receive 10 terabytes of cloud storage and 100 backup for Office 365 mailbox protection for just $90 per month for the first 3 months on a 12-month plan. Now, that's a huge saving of over $3,000 during the first month. So I suggest jumping on, creating a trial account and testing the service. So that's essentially it for today. Thank you for your time. Alan, again, thank you for co-presenting with me today. Really appreciate it and really appreciated your input.
My pleasure. No problems.
Everyone else, thank you for attending. Like I said, the recording and the slides will be out to you as soon as possible. Thank you all and have a good day.